hear from James Scott from First Interstate Bank about a program that we hope to see get off the ground in Montana.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you, Chuck. I'll take you up on the offer to come to Kentucky, not only because I'm interested in the program, but because I love bourbon. Well, thanks. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about PACE, and first, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a subject matter expert in this program. This is something that I'm just purely interested in from a financing standpoint, an economic development standpoint. And as an employee of First Interstate, I've got to say that First Interstate is evaluating the program, but hasn't really made a decision. And so when I speak about it, I'm not suggesting that the bank is a supporter, nor are we agreeing to lend. I think that's my legal responsibility that I have to take. But now that I've gotten the legal end out, I'd love to share with you guys about the program. PACE is a method of financing energy-efficient improvements to commercial and residential buildings through the use of special assessments. It's in some ways similar in what Chuck described, in that it's not necessarily a loan, but it's a way of financing improvements to property. So the use of special assessments tied to the property taxes help fund the repayment of the investments. It allows for 100% of these improvements to be financed for up to a 20-year term, allowing the incremental cost savings to justify the added expense of the improvements. Why PACE? It allows for property owners to make energy-efficient improvements that save money. Remember, the cheapest form of energy is the energy that you don't use, while improving the long-term value and creating clean energy jobs in the local economy. If you think about it, the property owner is saving themselves the utility expense. They're increasing the value of their property through making significant improvements in either solar, HVAC improvements, energy efficiency to the exterior, any number of things, and it also stimulates the economy. So that's why it gets us bankers excited. It's an old concept, but a new application. We've been using special assessments for a number of years to finance property improvements, from water and sewer services to local parks and sidewalks, lighting, and urban renewal efforts. If you look on your property tax bill, as I'm sure all of you guys do on a regular basis, you'll notice you may have a couple of special assessments. And if you're like me and you wonder what those are all about, you can dig into it and realize that there may have been, at one point in time in your neighborhood, somebody brought the sewer. And those are funded on a small level, and this is kind of how the program works. So this program uses this application on a property-specific basis to fund renewable and energy-efficient projects. PACE works a little bit like this. It needs to be enacted through an act of the state legislature, and then it relies on the individual municipalities and their county taxing authorities to establish a local or regional administrator to the PACE program. The DEQ has got a draft bill right now that will be going forth for this upcoming session. I've had an opportunity to take a look at it. I think it finished its public comment period, but essentially what it's doing is it's opting into a program that 33 other states and the District of Columbia have already passed in the U.S. And effectively what that does is it allows local municipalities to opt into the program, and then PACE providers, they could be a bank, it could be the municipality gets a large line of credit and funds projects through its bonding authority. One of the things that I think I'm suggesting for the program is, at least to start in Montana, it might be helpful if we get a group of community banks to help fund the improvements. The idea of creating a large pool of municipal money is not as viable an alternative as, let's say, in California and New York. But that's something that we're going to look at, and certainly I'm willing to support a variety of different capital sources to fund PACE. If created, any interested participant brings a proposal, project, and an application to the local program office for review and approval. And so similar to what Chuck talked about, you need to demonstrate that the cost of the improvements, when financed over time, is going to be less than your energy savings. So, if I'm let's say I've got a building and I want to put $200,000 into solar upgrades, and it's going to save me $33,000 a year in energy savings, but the incremental utility cost goes up by $17,000. There's obviously a spread, and you're going to be saving money even at year one. And because it's a simple payback of over, I think, I forget my math here, this is where the financing gets wonky, 6.5 years, the incremental cost savings will have paid back your $200,000 investment, but you're terming it out over a 20-year term. So essentially, you're saving yourself money. You don't have to pay any money to make the improvements, and it pencils out. I'll kind of show you a graph as to how that looks. If approved, the PACE provider can match a source of capital to fund the construction project, so it's essentially doing a construction loan. And I think that this is probably, from an easier way to explain it, on the commercial property side. If you've got a hotel and they, let's just use the Crown Plaza, I guess it's the DoubleTree now. If they want to make significant energy improvements, they can use the PACE program to fund 100% of these improvements to the building. And because they don't have to spend capital out of their own pocket, they can finance it over a 20-year period. It's a lot easier for the building owner to pallet that, spreading that over 20 years versus going to a traditional bank and getting a commercial loan. So anyway, that's kind of how the program works. Who can use PACE? You advance the slide for me. I may have lost my battery here. Thanks. Most buildings and even nonprofits, I guess the one entity that would not work would be government entities, school buildings or federal buildings or state buildings. But nonprofits can participate in PACE even if they don't receive a property tax bill. The PACE assessment can be added to their water charges or pilot. The municipality can also create a new piece of documentation that is issued to the nonprofit at the time those taxes normally go out. So again, a wide range of users can participate in PACE. Next slide. What can be financed? Here's a number of examples from HVAC, lighting, water pumps, obviously solar installation, and a variety of other energy-saving improvements. Go to the next map. You'll see that PACE legislation has been passed in 33 states and the District of Columbia, covering 80% of the U.S. population. As mentioned, there's a draft bill that will hopefully come before the state legislature this session. Of the states that have enacted legislation, PACE has funded over 730 projects at a total capital outlay of $230 million, with over 2,700 clean energy and construction-related jobs created. As mentioned, one of the major benefits of PACE is that it allows property owners to finance 100% of the costs of the improvements, capital that is either scarce or could be allocated for revenue generation or mission-specific program purposes that can be saved. Most commercial banks require between 20 to 30% equity in these types of projects. With the PACE structure, you're essentially financing 100% of your improvements on day one. PACE also allows financing terms that go out 20 years rather than the 5 to 7 year terms normally required in commercial lending. This allows the project with somewhat longer payback periods to be financially feasible rather than the low-hanging fruit projects. You can also finance a more comprehensive project which will have a deeper impact on your energy conservation goals. Because of the longer term applied to the financing, your annual PACE repayment is designed to be less than the cost savings and utility expense, a little bit like what Chuck described. You're going to pay a little bit more in your property tax bill, but again, you're going to save even more in your utility expense. With PACE, you don't have to wait to pay off financing to see an economic benefit. Even during the repayment process, the business is seeing cash flow in. PACE is also attached to the building. Because it's a property tax assessment, if I was to sell the property in 3 or 4 years, the person who would be buying the property would also be on the hook, but they'd also receive the benefit. So the building, not the property owner, is attached to the PACE project. So if you sell or transfer ownership, both the PACE obligation and the cost savings transfer as well. This removes part of the risk for commercial or residential property owners who are uncertain about how long they plan on holding onto the unit. PACE is also designed so that the tax assessments can be passed on to the tenants in a leasing arrangement, so in most cases the energy savings and the incremental costs are equitably shared. So if you've got a triple net lease with your tenants in a commercial building, or if you've got an apartment building, most oftentimes the way that the leasing structure in PACE works, both the energy savings and the costs of that program are shared down to your tenants. So again, there's a little bit of a split incentive with a lot of energy improvement projects. If you've got a commercial building, the owner is going to be paying the money to retrofit the building or make improvements. But if their triple net lease requires them, the tenants to pay that, then they're the ones who carry the burden. So anyway, it's a way to more equitably share the burden. Go to the next slide. The most successful PACE programs have been the ones with a well-organized and led administrative office or offices to process the deals, a multitude of public or private sources of capital. Again, this is the model we're talking about for the state, where if we can get either private capital providers or commercial banks to provide the initial support, they can lend into these deals at low interest rates and allow clean energy improvements to be financed as part of the property tax bill. The other thing that really helps this program is a good network of energy service professionals from energy auditing firms. I've gotten to know a guy who's got an office in Missoula, but they've also got an office here. I think the company's called McKinstry, and they're involved in taking a look at buildings and doing all of the audit process, seeing where you can obviously save by making energy improvements. So having a good network of these firms, as well as the clean energy professionals that will help provide the capital improvements. And finally, buy-in from the local municipalities who are going to help administer and collect the special assessments. So I think we really need to understand how we can engage all the stakeholders in this effort to move PACE through in the state, and both from people like Northern Plains and the Clean Energy Task Force, as well as maybe the building. There's a great green building group in Missoula that I've gotten to know, the Missoula Five Valleys Building Collaborative. There's a whole number of stakeholders that we'll need to engage as we push forth the effort to get PACE through our legislature. So anyway, in summary, we can just kind of skip this. I'll just say that this is a great opportunity, one that I think we'll obviously need to see how it moves through it, if it gets to the legislature and if it's voted upon. But again, much as Chuck talked about, the idea of being able to finance clean energy in a way that is scalable and is something that we'll be able to take advantage of, not only for large commercial projects, but on the residential projects, is something that will be an opportunity not only to improve the local economies and the trades, be an opportunity to save energy. Cheapest energy is the energy you don't use, and again to potentially make improvements to some of the older buildings and residences in our neighborhood that would benefit from some capital improvement. So anyway, that's my talk. Like I said, I'm just learning about it, but thanks for the opportunity to share about PACE.